Happy Monday, Razorback fans. You're 5 days away from Arkansas at Auburn. You successfully made it through 7 games in a bye week, and now there's 5 games left. 5 big games. Arkansas sits at 4-3, a big win over BYU going into the bye week. So that was big time, but now you got 5 games to try to end off the season on a high note. And my preseason predictions, I had them losing the 3 games they lost and then winning out the rest. So it's possible. I thought it would happen preseason. Now that we are where we are, I don't know how I feel about it. And we're going to talk about that on today's episode of the Gridiron Hogs podcast. We're going to talk about what happened during the bye week, how Arkansas got healthy, the things we heard from Sam Pittman, and the two media availabilities we had with him. So you're listening to the Gridiron Hogs podcast. I've got Robert Stewart with me. I'm Mason Choate. We're from HawgBeat.com, HawgBeat.com. We're the Rivals site covering the Arkansas Razorbacks. And this is a podcast that we do every single week. It was daily for the first 7 weeks of the season, but programming announcement, we're now going to go to Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And that's really, it's not because, we could handle the grind of daily, but we feel like, we're at the point in the season where every day, you're not getting a whole lot of news. It's just the team's getting healthy and they have a game on Saturday. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday is the new schedule for the Gridiron Hogs podcast. And we're excited about that because it's about to be basketball season too. Got a lot to do. And so let's talk about this football team though, Robert. The bye week, much needed for a team that was really beat up.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like every single question about what's going wrong for Sam Pittman has been met with a response about, we're banged up. And it sounds like, you know, we'll get to talk to him again this week, but as of last week, he's expecting everybody back except for Jalen Catalon, Ladarius Bishop, and Torian Carter. But those are three guys that we knew weren't going to be available for a while. So, um, like you said, they were banged up. Getting healthy is going to be huge. They didn't do a whole lot of physical practicing, no physical practicing at all last week, actually, just walkthroughs. And so, yeah, I mean, it'd be great to see a full cast of characters out there on the plains this weekend.
Yeah, some people were kind of upset about the walkthroughs. And so I get being upset, like, for a team that has really struggled tackling, like Arkansas is definitely near the bottom of the FBS as far as Pro Football Focus grades go for tackling. But I just look at it this way, like if they're going to be tackling in practice this week, how much better are they going to get at tackling during the bye week, practicing it than they did any other week when we heard from Sam Pittman was, they're focusing on tackling. It hasn't, I mean, it's gotten a little bit better, but it's not like all the other weeks that they've been, putting a big emphasis on tackling, it's gotten that much better. So during the bye week, take that advantage, get guys like Bumper Pool, Jaden Hazelwood, those guys who they've been playing through injuries, get them the chance to get healthy. And so that's what they did. Pittman said they did 3 walkthroughs, which is more than the usual 1 or 2 that they would have in an open week. It seems like that's something they've done the past 2 years. Um, I think last year they only did 2 walkthroughs, but he said last year they had 4 games after the bye week. This year they have 5, and they might be more beat up this year than they were last year going into the bye week. So uh, he said basically what he said was like they didn't want to chance anything like a hand, a finger, anything happening to anybody during any type of physical practice. One thing that he didn't like about it was the fact that, by not having a physical practice, you're not allowing those younger guys who need to prove themselves more to, uh, you know, show that, they can make big tackles when they do, scrimmages. Those younger guys can't have that experience in the scrimmages. But another thing is that the injuries throughout the season have led to younger guys getting more reps than they might normally get. Like you think Sam Bakke, Quincy McAdoo, those guys might not have been playing at all at wide receiver, especially in practice and fastball and scrimmages, all that. But now you look at them and both of them have been running with the second team defense during fastball. And so I don't know if you're going to really see them very much on the field. Probably not at all, unless, the injuries continue to get worse. But you look at a guy like Kewan Parker. Keywan Parker might not have played much this year if it wasn't for these injuries. So, yes, it's an unfortunate, situation that Keywan Parker had to get on the field for, but also you look at it, if you have injuries continuing to linger, maybe you feel a little bit more confident in a guy like Keywan Parker, a guy like Trent Gordon. Don't you think, Robert?
Yeah, and another thing about injuries and the bye week, like it's a perfect time for rest. One of the most frustrating parts about football for me is guys who are stubborn and try to play through injury. Um, this is the perfect time for them to relax, get healthy, because you know what? They're gonna have a normal week of practice leading up to this game against Auburn this week. So it, I just don't see it as a big deal at all.
One thing to mention that Pittman mentioned that I made this like I kind of talked to you about this after his Wednesday press conference. He said that KJ Jefferson did not throw and was not going to throw at all last week because of a shoulder. He had that weird hit against BYU there at the end where he like landed uncomfortably on his helmet, and it looked bad. It did. And then after the game, we hear from Pittman that it was a stinger, and then we talked to KJ Jefferson after the game, which for those who don't know, there's basically a rule: you don't talk to injured players. If the player's injured, you don't talk to them.
In
And
and of itself, that was a great sign.
it was, and KJ said he was fine. It was just a stinger. Stingers can be scary. There was a guy in my high school who had to get they had to bring the ambulance onto the field and take him straight to the hospital. Like he was not moving whatsoever, and it turned out to just be a stinger. So it can look scary. And but the reason he didn't throw was because of a sore shoulder. So that was interesting, but that was something that I did not really tweet out or make a huge like I wrote it in my story. So if you read my story, you knew about it. But I feel like with the way that Razorback fans have kind of been on edge, if you tweet something like that out, they might take it the wrong way of like KJ Jefferson's not throwing a ball this week, and then everybody would be like, "What the heck is going on? Why can't we say hell?" So, um, but according to Pittman, starting today, Monday, KJ Jefferson and the entire team practicing like normal. It's going to be a normal week leading up to Auburn. So the good thing is that coming off of a bye week, you're playing a team like Auburn. Like Auburn's a bad team. And so let's start getting into the remaining schedule for Arkansas. You start with Auburn off of the bye week. Um, Auburn's a bad football team. Brian Harsin might be out of a job after this year. He might be out of a job before the season's over. If you're Arkansas, like no offense to Auburn fans, but if you're Arkansas, you want to beat Auburn so bad that Brian Harsin doesn't have a job after this game. After the way that Auburn games have gone in the past few years, you think about the Bo Nix fumble. Yes, it was a fumble. I mean, everybody listening to this podcast probably agrees it was a fumble. And then last year's game in Fayetteville, Sam Pittman, continues to talk about how that's a game that they probably should have won. I think he views that game last year as the one game where Arkansas should have won that game. I mean, there's other ones, but this is the one where there was really no excuse. So I think there's no excuse for Arkansas to lose this game this year. Especially coming off the bye week, having your guys healthy, you should not lose this game.
You're absolutely correct. They really have no business losing this week. Um, Yet having said that, I still just have a bad feeling about it. I mean, it's been what since 2015 since the Hogs have won against the Tigers. It just and there's like no logic behind this feeling, but it it doesn't feel great. I mentioned this preseason. I expect this one to be a loss, and I'm still having trouble talking myself into the fact that it should be a win, right?
So even at this point, so like preseason, I told you that that's a stupid pick, and now you're still feeling that way.
And listen, I knew that Auburn wasn't going to be good at the time. I just the vibes are bad. That's really all there is to it for me. But I mean, if you look at it statistically, Arkansas is absolutely the better team on paper and should perform well even on the road this coming week.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Auburn's schedule. I mean, the best team that they've beat this season is Missouri. That's and they barely beat. They shouldn't have
They
beat Missouri. They
they
should not
needed
have won that
they
game.
needed a colossal mistake by the other Tigers to beat them.
And for Auburn though, for the bright side for Auburn is they're also coming off of a bye week. So, but it's going to be an 11 a.m. kick. I think that that benefits Arkansas. You think back to last year, the 11 a.m. kick at Georgia. I think that was just a completely different circumstance. College game days there. It's a huge game, top 10 matchup. This is not that. This is an Auburn team that stinks. It's an 11 a.m. kickoff. I'm sure that they won't fill up the stadium as much as they would if it was a night game, something like that. So um, I still think Arkansas beats Auburn. I really think Arkansas needs to prove something not only to other people, the country, but they need to prove something to themselves, kind of like they did against BYU. They need to prove that we are a much better team than Auburn. Don't play down to Auburn. Just blow them out. Arkansas can do that.
They need another one of those stretches of 8 straight scoring drives or whatever, right? I mean, I know that BYU is not an SEC defense, but I mean you really, really have to prove your superiority this weekend, like you said.
Speaking of BYU, they got killed by Liberty. Just absolutely demolished. I think it was like 41-14. Um,
Liberty,
that
who's next on the Arkansas schedule.
Liberty, who's next on the Arkansas schedule, and they should have their starting quarterback transfer. He played at Baylor, played at Utah, I believe. So they should have him back. They've been playing without him. They should have him back against Arkansas. Liberty, November 5th, homecoming for Arkansas. That'll start a 4-game or a 3-game stretch where they'll play at home. It'll be the first time they've played at home since Alabama on October 1st. So um, I still think Arkansas should win that game, but just seeing the way that Liberty beat the brakes off of BYU, it makes you worry a little bit. That's no longer like a game that you just mark down as a win, and it never really was because Liberty's a good football team. Hugh Freeze, good football coach, but you still felt like Arkansas was going to win this game. I still think they will, but Liberty looking a little bit scarier after that win over BYU.
Yeah, for sure. But again, it's a non-conference opponent. Arkansas absolutely must flex its SEC muscle in that game.
Yeah, okay. It was 41-14. Maybe Arkansas broke BYU. I think that's what some people were saying. I think BYU was broke to begin with, to be honest. I don't think BYU was that good. I never did. That's why I made it my lock of the century. I haven't talked about that on this podcast. 2-0 in lock of the centuries, by the way. Picked Notre Dame to beat Tennessee in the Super Regionals, and I picked Arkansas to beat BYU. So if you ever see me on Twitter at Choate Mason, put out a lock of the century, you better put a lot of money on it.
Even if it comes more than once a century.
Yeah, I mean that's the people who are like, how are you gonna have multiple locks of the century in the same century? Like you can only have one. Whatever, shut up. It's for fun. All right, moving on. Then you got LSU after Liberty. LSU who just beat Ole Miss, gave Ole Miss its first loss of the season. This LSU team, we watched them against Florida State in week 1 and thought, okay, LSU sucks. They're not that great. Florida State ended up being, I think, better than people expected. And I think at this point, LSU is better than people expected. Outside of a big loss to Tennessee, who we now know is a really, really good football team after they beat Alabama, LSU, I mean, they beat Florida, they beat Ole Miss, they beat Auburn, they beat Mississippi State, and then they had a couple non-conference wins against New Mexico State and Southern. They do have Alabama this week, and then they'll be playing Arkansas. So you get LSU off of the Alabama week, which is huge. I still think Arkansas wins that, especially because it's a home game.
Yeah, I mean, like you said earlier, LSU didn't start the strongest, but it feels like, Brian Kelly's figured it out with that group now. Think back to 2020 and Sam Pittman's first year. Tough game against Georgia to start things off, and then 3-2 in the next 5 games. And I feel like I don't remember if this is true or not, but I feel like Auburn was one of those first 6 games, and therefore probably should have been a win because of the fumble, right? Um, but that it feels like the Tigers have figured it out in Baton Rouge, and you know I'm not feeling so good about that game anymore. So, with them and Ole Miss back to back, they're at the end of the home slate. Feels like at the very least you'd like to get a split there.
Yeah, looking at it before LSU beat Ole Miss, I looked at Ole Miss as the only game that Arkansas might lose the remainder of the season. And now I don't feel good about the LSU game. I still think they're going to win. I don't feel as good about it. And then you talk about the Ole Miss game, which is the next week, November 19th. I mean, having those games back to back at home is huge. You like to have that. It's very big time for Arkansas. Hopefully, they can stay healthy for both of those games. But the Ole Miss game is going to be tough. LSU, of course, is going to be tough because you talked about it. They're better than they are, or better than they were earlier in the season. I want to look at Ole Miss, who they play before that game, because I mean, we just talked about LSU coming off the Alabama game. Let's see. They got
I think
A&M this weekend. Then they have a bye week. Then they're coming off of Alabama. So you get Ole Miss and LSU, both of them coming off of games against Alabama. That's huge.
right. And I haven't watched much Ole Miss this year, but it seems like they were undefeated for too long. I mean, Kentucky was a good win, but I don't really know if they ever had any really impressive wins outside of that. I don't know.
No, let me run you through their schedule. Troy, UCA, Georgia Tech, Tulsa, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, Auburn, and then LSU. That is an awful schedule. I mean, Kentucky, and they won it in a nail biter by 3. But I mean, Troy, UCA, Georgia Tech, Tulsa, all those teams are not good. And then you played 2 of the worst teams in the SEC in Vanderbilt and Auburn. And then you go and lose to LSU, who is a decent opponent. And Kentucky is a team that I feel like every year starts off the season super hot and then they just trail off at the end.
And the LSU game last week wasn't close, right? Like 45-20.
Um, yeah, 45-20 LSU.
I mean, that's a beatdown.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I think Ole Miss was exposed for the frauds that they are. This weekend they play A&M, which we know that A&M's not that good of a team. That loss that Arkansas had to them is going to be a bad loss. But if A&M beats Ole Miss and it's at A&M, it's in College Station, then you really expose Ole Miss for the frauds that they were. So that'll be interesting to keep an eye on. And then, of course, you play at Missouri and Columbia to end the season. I feel like we both think that's a win, but I mean, it's just one of those games. Arkansas always struggles in Columbia, so I still think they win though. I mean, Missouri's just not good.
I do too, and yet it feels like even if it's by the thinnest of margins, Missouri might be a little better than everybody expected them to be this year.
Yeah, I mean, they've played competitive games. You think back to that Georgia game where they only lost by 4. You felt like Missouri was always going to lose it, but it was interesting that they kept it close. Let's see. They got killed by Kansas State, who's good. Should have beat Auburn, but Auburn's bad. Kept it close against Florida. Only lost by 7 to Florida, and then they won by 3 over Vanderbilt. So, and then they've got South Carolina, Kentucky, Tennessee, and they'll be coming off New Mexico State before the Arkansas game. So that's good for them. Arkansas will be coming off of Ole Miss. So
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's going to be the 34-17 three-score game or whatever it was in Fayetteville last year, but Arkansas really does need to finish on a high note and win that game.
okay, so Arkansas sits at 4-3. They've got 5 games left at Auburn, Liberty, LSU, Ole Miss, at Missouri. What are you saying their record's going to be these last 5 games?
I mean, minimum you have to win three, right?
I think minimum, and Arkansas fans would hate to hear this, but minimum you just got to win 2 to get to a bowl game. You cannot go 5-7 or 4-8. Like you have to get to a bowl game this year. 6-6 would definitely be, a failure, I think, based off of the expectations going into the season, the talent this team had. But you have to win 2 at the very least. 3 if you're trying to like make it look a little better, but realistically, if you're talking about preseason expectations, you probably got to win 4. 8 wins, I think, is probably reaches the preseason expectation.
I would agree with that. And yet at this juncture, I'm saying you got to win three because, like you said, I I don't think 6-6 is a bad mark. Simply because you have to consider the big picture of the last 5 years, right? It's like, yes, it's a regression from last year, but I mean, you were happy to win an SEC game 2 years ago, okay? Like going to a bowl, it's still progress. Maybe it's a minor setback, but in a way, last year may have been a fluke. Like they were really good last year. It was really fun last year. But I don't think it's a bad thing if you go 6-6 this year. I'm saying you got to win three to make up for the A&M loss earlier in the year because that one should have been a win.
So are you saying the 3 wins are, I'm going to assume, Auburn, Liberty, Missouri?
Yes, you need to win those three. I think you should split LSU and Ole Miss, and so that would put you at 8-4. And yet, I don't think 9 is out of the picture.
Like I said earlier, I I predicted them to win all of these games preseason. I'm still undefeated in my preseason predictions. I still feel good about them having a chance to win every single game. I think 4-1. Okay, I think 3-2 is, as you mentioned, 3-2 is the floor. Like, you can't do worse than that. I think 5-0 is doable. I'm gonna say they go 5-0. I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna say that they win out. They beat Auburn, a bad Auburn team. They beat a good Liberty team at home. They get LSU and Ole Miss, both of them coming off Alabama, and then you beat a Missouri team that you should beat. You know,
He's drinking the Kool-Aid, ladies and gentlemen.
there's no Kool-Aid to drink. I think that these are all winnable games for Arkansas. It's just like, can you stay healthy? Can you take advantage of the bye week and not get guys hurt? Like a guy like Miles Slusher, who we don't know what's going on with him. He might not play another game this season. But like a guy like him, got to keep him healthy. You got to stay healthy in the secondary. You can't have him missing games. You can't have Kari Johnson missing games. You can't have Jaden Johnson missing games. You can't have KJ Jefferson miss a game. You can't have Jaden Hazelwood miss a game. Like, you can't, not that Jaden Hazelwood has missed a game, but he's been dealing with an injury. You have to stay healthy. And if they stay healthy, they will win out.
That's a fair point. Want to circle back to what you just said there. You sort of lumped all those guys into the same category. KJ Jefferson is like all caps, cannot miss a game.
Yes, KJ Jefferson cannot miss a game. You hope that the sore shoulder is what it is. It's just a sore shoulder. So, but that's what I'm saying. 5-0. All right. Let's wrap it up here with our friends from myperfectfranchise.net. Always thankful for them. They do a great job over there. That's Andy Luedecke. Give him a call, 404-973-9901. If you are a displaced corporate executive and you want to put your career in your own hands. Andy Luedecke, he's a longtime Rivals member, big sports guy. He's a franchise veteran. He owns multiple right now, and he uses the expertise that he has to help others find their American dream through a very thorough and free consultation process. So call him and put your life and career in your own hands. Once again, that number is 404-973-9901. It's myperfectfranchise.net. All right, reminder, we will only be doing Monday, Wednesday, Fridays moving forward. So you had the episode today. Talk to you on Wednesday, and we'll talk to you on Friday on the Gridiron Hogs podcast.